They introduced a new food system into ECO in version 9.4. But what might seem like a relatively small update to the game has some pretty big impacts to multiple skills and how people's strategy for acquiring skill points has now changed. So I want to go over what that change is all about and talk about those impacts. ECO 9.4 was a big update, and one of the big changes they introduced was a lot more variety in the food system. They introduced the concept of favorite foods, or foods you like the best, and foods you don't like. Each person who joins a server is randomly assigned foods that they find tasty, and others that they don't. This ranking of foods that a person would find appealing is broken up into 5 ranks, all the way from things you find delicious, all the way down to things you think are horrible. Now, because these likes and dislikes are random, each time you join a new server, or your favorite server fires up a new instance of the game, you'll be assigned a completely different set of foods that you like and dislike. This makes it so every player won't be able to develop just a single meta and repeat that over and over for every game they play. They're going to have to figure out the best foods for them to eat every time. I think this is pretty good because it keeps things from getting stale and introduces a new small challenge that not only you'll have to face, but that every player will be facing, which makes it seem fair. Now, the reason a player would even want to give attention to whether they like or dislike a given food is because it's going to directly affect their skill point generation. Skill point generation is influenced from 2 primary sources: the kind of housing where you live and the food you eat. And in my personal opinion, I think the food you eat is the much stronger influence. So eating more of the foods that you like will increase your skill point multiplier accordingly. However, the game designers went one step farther and were pretty smart. If you keep eating the same food over and over again, even if it's one of your favorites, that skill point multiplier is going to start dropping. This means for a player to try to maintain the highest level of skill point generation, they not only need to seek out their favorite foods, but eat a variety of those favorite foods. Again, all randomly generated for their preference. It also seems that you don't need to just be looking for these tasty foods at the top tier level. It seems that favorite foods are being provided at each one of the tiers as well. So things all the way from charred food all the way up to the very elegant elk taco. So you need to seek out these favorite foods all the way from the start of the game well into its advanced stages. But the developers weren't done with their trickery in the food department. Your favorite foods at the beginning are not even known to you. You have to try different foods to find out whether they're something you're going to like or hate. I found this to be extremely good and adds to the overall purpose of providing variety. If a person wanted to try to game the system, go down a cook's list of offered foods, hover over the item, and look to see if it's something they found tasty, then they'd be sadly disappointed. Much like your mom wanting you to go and try things growing up, you're going to have to eat it to see if you like it. Now, what I've described so far is how foods impact the individual players and their skill points. And I know it's going to impact my economy a bit as well. I used to select 2 or 3 foods that gave me a reasonably good balance of nutrition. Then I'd set an attractive buy price for the items at one of my stores, maybe something like 40 units each, and then let a cook come around doing daily deliveries and drop off my daily allotment of food. I can still do that, and maybe I'll have to increase the variety of foods I'm eating. Also, depending on how much skill point suppression there is from eating maybe my 2 or 3 favorite foods, I might have to include some things that I'm just okay with, but not crazy about, just to keep from lowering my overall gain. If you really think about this, it has an impact to players that spend a lot of hours every day grinding away in the game. They need to eat to do work. They're going to try to eat the best foods they can for the best skill points. but it may be that even trying to spread your diet around 2 or 3 different foods might not be enough. It may be that including a few suboptimal foods just to spread around their variety while you're eating winds up having a greater positive impact to the skill points than just sticking with the 2 or 3 of your favorite foods. I don't have enough data yet to really form a strategy on this, and in truth, because this is a fairly new feature, the game developers will probably continuously tweak and adjust the values and its overall impact depending on what they see happening from player feedback. So it probably wouldn't be good for me right now to try to make any absolute statements about strategy. So far, I've just talked about this food and the different ways it can impact players from a consumption standpoint. But you can probably already see how this is going to influence the cooking skills as well. Before this change, it was pretty common for a cook to just focus on creating a few items of each tier of food that is generally found to be best for providing calories, maximizing the use of raw foods in the recipes, and providing things that people found appealing in terms of skill point generation. That approach clearly won't work anymore. Cooks will now have to provide an almost full menu of items to be able to serve all the different preferences from all the players. I still think a person can just specialize in a few items, but it would probably be leaving a lot of customers to go shopping elsewhere for their food. To increase the difficulty just a little bit, they also introduced more actual recipes into the game. So there's a lot more different kinds of foods people might prefer than there even were before. This includes a bunch of fish recipes, which up until now, fish has not been given a lot of love. So anybody that enjoys dabbling with fishing will now have a lot more to do with those honkers than just charring them on an open fire. There's going to be some demand. And they made a change to the fishing, so the fish traps can no longer be used in salt water. To get those tasty and larger saltwater fish, it's time to go grab your rod and reel. The changes to food consumption extend even beyond all the cooking skills. This may also have a significant impact to the farming industry. With there now being a demand across the spectrum for all different kinds of cooked foods, that is going to translate into a demand for a full variety of raw foods. Before, farmers could do pretty well just producing 2, 3, maybe 4 different kinds of crops. You grow some wheat to support and eat breads and pastries, grow some corn to supply corn and cornmeal products, and you grow some beets that provide a good supply of sugar. There are some other things that a cook would probably want to grow, like rice and tomatoes. But generally speaking, you didn't have to grow a huge variety of crops to stay pretty well employed. I love the farming in eco. Next to masonry, it's probably my favorite thing to do. And now I could see that there could be a greater need to have farmers spread across a diverse set of biomes to help supply the wide variety of raw foods. A couple people in the grasslands, a couple people in the rainforest, a few in the woodland areas, somebody in the marshes, and maybe even someone specializing in the prickly pear fruit out in the desert. I suppose one person still could have multiple plots spread all around the map and just make their rounds picking and replanting. But the fact that there could be a much higher demand for what used to be considered a rather uncommonly used crop might mean that you just need more farmers. And certainly, a farmer now is going to have a lot more need to diversify. The game has always allowed anyone with a hoe to be able to go out, plant seeds, and harvest crops. Maybe not overly effectively, but they could do it. I've always been an advocate for creating laws that help channel any farming activity to the people that actually have the farming and gathering type skills. But I'm also a little curious just to see how these changes in food variety for consumption are going to impact the overall crop production. There were a number of other important changes in 9.4, but I thought this change in the food area probably had the widest and broadest impact, so I wanted to give it some special attention. It has been nearing about 2 months now since its introduction, and this feature of favorite foods does seem to be under administrative control to be able to turn off or on, as it was considered still in a very early experimental implementation. So if you're not seeing this food improvement on your server, even though you might be currently in one of the 9.4 updates, ask your administrator to see if they're willing to turn it on. I'd be curious to hear any of your thoughts or your observations about how this food thing has changed your gameplay. Let me know what you think of the change, and I'll be talking to you later.